Web applications offer options for enhanced customer support. They can be the first line of contact between potential customers and the businesses. Operations performed to make the application work is the vital part of any application. Hello guys, I'm Bhavita, and in today's tutorial, we'll understand how we can perform CRUD operation in Angular. Firstly, let's look into the agenda for today. We're going to start off the session by understanding what CRUD operation means. Next, we'll go ahead and understand how we can perform CRUD in Angular. Next, we'll see the prerequisites required to perform CRUD operations in Angular. And finally, we'll create an application to perform CRUD operations. But before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to Edureka YouTube channel and hit the notification bell to never miss an update on the latest videos. Also, if you're interested in online training certification, do check out the link given in the description box below. Now, firstly, let's understand what CRUD really means. Now, the ability to create, read, update, and delete items in web application is pretty crucial to most of the full-stack projects. For example, if we're creating a storefront, blog posting page, to-do list, or even social media clone, without CRUD actions, we'll get stuck very quickly. Now, let's see what CRUD is. Now, as you can see from this diagram, CRUD is an acronym which abbreviates to create, read, update, and delete. Now, these are the four most basic operations that can be performed with most traditional database systems, and they are the backbone for interacting with any databases. Now, the CRUD acronym identifies all of the major functions that are inherited to relational database and the application used to manage them, which include Oracle database, MongoDB, Microsoft SQL Server, MySQL, and many such others. Now here, since we have to have a data, I've considered a small employee schema, which is in JSON format. Now this is just for our reference. So let's start with first operation. That's create. Now in create, users can use this function to add a new record to the database. Now the create function in a SQL relational database application is called insert. Now it is also known as create in Oracle and so in MongoDB. Now remember that a row is referred as a record and columns are referred as attributes. Now a user can add new attributes to the table by creating a new record and populating it with data that corresponds to each property. However, in general case scenario, only an administrator may be able to add new attributes to the database. Now with that, let's move on to our second function, which is read. Now the read command is something like a search command. So basically it allows the user to search for or even read the values in individual records in a particular table. Now users may be able to find records using their keywords or even filters for specific criteria. Now if you consider there is a database called vehicles, if you need to search a particular record called Toyota Corolla, you can apply filters like model or which year it has been created in, something like this. Now let's move on and understand our third operation in CRUD, which is update. Now using update function, we can actually make changes to existing records in the database. Now users may need to edit information in numerous fields to completely change a record. To explain this, let's consider a table called restaurant. Now this might have attributes like dish, cooking time, cost, pricing. Now this contains recipes for menu items in a database. Now chef chooses to replace one of the dish's ingredients with something new one day. Now as a result, the old database record must be updated with all attribute values updated to reflect new dish's features. Also here, I might add that update function is simply called as update in SQL and MongoDB or even in Oracle. With that, let's move on to our final operation, which is delete. Now, users can actually utilize the delete function to delete records from a database that no longer is needed. Now, the delete function is available in both SQL and MongoDB and even in Oracle perhaps. Now, this will allow users to remove one or more records from the database. Now, users may be able to do a hard delete or soft delete in some relational database applications. Now a hard delete removes records from the database permanently, and a soft delete on the other hand may merely change the status of a row to show that it has been deleted while leaving the data intact. Now with that, we'll see how we can perform CRUD operations in Angular. So to perform CRUD operations in Angular, there are a few steps that we need to consider. So firstly, we're going to mock the backend data using JSON server. Next, we'll create an Angular module, and then we'll import Angular HTTP client module and forms module. Next, we'll create components. So we are creating different components here. We'll understand that in our demonstration. Next, we'll add Angular routing, and then similarly, we'll add Angular service. Next, we'll create a model. Finally, we'll implement all our CRUD methods and call those CRUD methods as our final step. So to understand that, let's go ahead and look at our operational demo. So in today's demo, we'll be understanding how we created this particular application. Now, this is a simple application where we can show our records or we can add our records using this particular form. We have a simple search button and this is our home page. Now to browse from one tab to another, I have added routing. Now I have created services as well. We'll understand each and everything when we look into the demonstration. Now let's go ahead and see how our CRUD operations work here. Now as you can see, I have already added a record. Now let's go ahead and add a record in order to understand our CRUD operations. Now to understand our CRUD operations, let's go ahead and create records. Now I'm just going to say XYZ as my name, and I'm going to say senior man, short for manager. Location, I'm just going to say London and say 2000. When I say submit, it says save successfully. Now this means our database has accepted this record, which means create operation is performed in our CRUD. Now next we have read. As you can see, we have read operation automatically being performed as we can see our record popped up. Now also, since I've created a tab to display our employee records, we can also see our records being displayed here. Now with that, we'll move on to our update. Now as you can see, I have created an edit button over here to edit our record. Now once I click this, you can see all my record is being popped up here. Now let me go ahead and edit it. I'm just going to say India, and it says updated successfully. Here completes our update function from our CRUD. The last part is delete. As you can see, delete button is there. Now if I go ahead and say delete, there is a toast that's been popping up and it asks me if I'm sure if I want to delete the record. And mind you, when I say delete, my record is being deleted even from my database. So I'm just going to go ahead and say OK. Now this means our record is being deleted, and as you can see, our record is not being displayed here in our employees record as well. Now let's see how this is being stored in our MongoDB or backend. Now I'm going to refresh this. As you can see, my only one single data that I've added through my forms is being displayed here in a JSON format. And you can also look at the auto-generated ID for each of the record. Now let's go ahead and delete the existing record and see if the deleted record will be deleted from my database as well. Now I'm just going to delete this record. Now let's go ahead and see in our Mongo. Now let me refresh this. As you can see, there is no data. Now this means there is a connection between database and our frontend. We'll look how we have created all this in our demo. But before we get into our demo, let's see what are the prerequisites that we need to create our application and to perform our CRUD operations. So looking at the pre-requirements, firstly we have client side. We need to make sure that we are using TypeScript and our system is compatible of using TypeScript. Also, we need to make sure Angular CLI is being installed in our system. Now, make sure your NPM package has been installed and Angular CLI latest version is being installed in order for us to run our application with ease. Now, next we have server side. On the server side, I'll be using Node.js and MongoDB. So here, you don't have to worry as I'll be showing how to set up your MongoDB in your system. Now with that, let's proceed to our demonstration. Now, first step in our demonstration is to install MongoDB. So let's go ahead and see how we can do that. I'm just going to say install MongoDB. And when you say that, just go here. And depending on the operating system that you use, you can install your MongoDB edition. Now, after you do this, there are few commands that you'll have to accept. Now, once you do that, you just have to go to command prompt. Let me show you the next process. Now, once you've installed your MongoDB, the installation file will be recorded in your program files. Now, when you go to your program files, you can find a file called MongoDB. Here, you'll have to go into the server, your version, bin, and inside that, there will be an exe file. Now, since I've already installed, I have no exe file here. And once you click on that exe file, there'll be a bunch of messages where you'll have to accept it and it'll further be installed. Now, with that, there'll be a pop-up called Installation Compass. Now, you can install your Compass, which will give you your desktop application. With that, your installation will be completed. But in order for it to run as a server, you need to run a few commands in your command prompt. How will you do that? Well, firstly, we need to give this command in our command prompt, cd and redirect to your file. Where will you get this link is here. Now, wherever your exe file is there, copy this link in your program files or wherever your exe file is being stored. Now, once you do that, go to your command prompt and give this particular command, cd, paste that link. When you enter, you will get into the directory. Now, once you do that, it is still not run, but it has gone into the directory. Now, next, we'll have to create a file for storing all our database records. We can do that in our C drive. Now, I have done in my C drive. As you can see here, there is a data file here, and in that I've created a DB file. Here, all my records of DB will be stored. Now, this is required for us to have all the records in one place. You can give any name to it. Now, once you do that, your second command can be run. --db path and directory. Now, again, this link can be obtained from here. Copy that link, paste it in your command prompt. To ease our work, we can actually paste both the commands in a notepad. Save this as anything that you want. I'm just going to say commands.bat. Remember, it should be .bat. Save this in a place where your files are present. Your MongoDB files are present. I'm just going to go and save. As you can see, I have come into my bin folder. I'm going to save this here. Now, all you have to do is run that particular command. Now, since I have already done that, I'm not going to do it again. My connection will be established. With that, my connection is already established. Now, you should get a message something like this. It says connecting to MongoDB with your server number. Now, let's go ahead and open our MongoDB app. Now, when you open your app, you'll have something called as connect. When you connect, it will auto-generate this page and you can just say connect. Again, since I have already connected to a connection, I'm not going to do it again. The next thing you will see is adding a database. Let's go ahead and see how that works. Now, once you connect, it will redirect you to this page where you can create your database. Now, I'm going to create my database as CRUD and collection name as employees. Since I've already done that, I will avoid this step. Once you do that, just say create database. And once you have created your database will be created here. You can open it and you can see all your collections displayed here. Now, I've created two of the connections. So it says employee and employees. With that, your collections have been created. You can add data over here as well. But since we are using our front-end client-side application to add data, let's not do it. But to add it, you can just import your file or just insert a document. Inserting document will take your record in JSON format. It will also give you auto-generated ID as you have already seen in the demonstration. Now let's go ahead and start with our creation. So firstly, to create any particular Angular application, I'm going to create a project name called CRUD demo. This is just a project name. Next, we are going to add services, client side, server side, all the files required. Let's go ahead and start with that. First thing we're going to do here is create a package.json file. Now let's go ahead and see how that is done. Now in order to create a package.json file, all I have to do is give this command npm space init. When I do that, as you can see, a package.json file will be created. Now all you have to do is just keep hitting enter. Now I'm just going to keep saying enter. It's going to ask if it is okay. Just say yes. And as you can see, package.json has been created. Now let's move on to our next step. Now we need to create a body parser. For that, I'm going to go ahead and give the command npm install express mongoose body parser. And I need to be saving it in a file. So I'm just going to say save. Now this might take a while. Now as you can see, our body parser is being created, and there is one more file where we have created for all our operational purposes. Now next, let's go ahead. Now to start coding, first thing we have to establish connection between our server and our DB. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to say and create a file here called db.js. Now once I do this, I will have to call all my collections. Now to do that, I'm going to call my mongoose. Now as you can see here, first thing that I've done is I've established connection with my server. Now this is my port number. Now I have to give an error message to say if my connection is succeeded or not, and that will be displayed in my console. Here is what I've done here. If my connection is established, I'm going to say MongoDB connection succeeded, or else it's going to show me an error. Now with that, we have connected to our server. I'm going to save this. Now next thing we're going to do is we're going to give a command in our node to make sure this connection that we just created is established. I'm going to say node db.js. Now as you can see, it says MongoDB connection succeeded. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that nodemon is being installed for me to make my connection instantaneous. This will make me avoid running the connection again and again if I make any new changes. So all I have to do is, the command you can see here is nodemon db.js. Now I'll run that. Running that will make me avoid redundancy of giving the code again. Now let's go ahead and create our root JavaScript file, which is index.js. Now I'm going to do that. Now I've created my index.js. Now in my index.js, all I have to create is a request statement for express for calling my express API. Next, I have to create a body parser as I have created a body parser. Next, I have to call my DB file. Next, in order for me to create port connection here for port number 3000, where all my server-side request will be passed, I need to call my console and create it here. With that, I think we are ready to proceed next. So the next step is to create models. For that, I'm going to create a folder known as models. Now, once we've created our models, we're going to create a file known as employees.js, which will be present in our models. I'm going to say enter. Now in my employee.js here, I'm going to have to give my schema. But before that, make sure you give all your required statements in every JS file that you create in your Node.js. So I'm going to call the request statements. Now, as you can see, I have called my required statement, and after that, I have given Mongoose connection. Next, as you can see, I have created a schema with a type string for my name, type string for my position, type string for office, and type number, which is integer, for my salary. With that, I'll have to export my employee record over here. Now, this completes our employees.js file. Now let's move on. Now the next thing is our main goal here. We are going to implement CRUD operation, create, read, update, delete. Now for that, I'm going to have to install or create another folder known as controllers. Now inside this folder, I'm going to create a file. File name is going to be employee controller .js. Now here again, as I've told you before, we need to call all our required statements. So the first thing is I'm going to pass my required statement. Now as you can see, I'm establishing router connection here through my express. Now once this is done, let me go ahead and create a get statement. Now here in my get operation, I have requested the result, and here in case I cannot retrieve my employees, it's going to show me error on my console. Otherwise, it's going to give me the data. Now, employee is something that we created right now. And for this to happen, we need to give an export statement because we need to export the router from our main route. Now I'm going to say this exports router. Now with that, let's go ahead and add our employee controller to call in our main page. Now as you can see, I have added employee controller that I just created here. Now similarly, I'm going to create a post request. Now for that, I'm going to go ahead and give all the requirements. Now here in my post request, as you can see, I have given my structure of the schema and then employee save. Now this is a keyword for me to save all my records that I'll be entering into my forms. Now with that, I close it again with the router. Why don't we just go ahead and see how it works in our browser, how the record is being retrieved by my server. Now to understand that, I'm going to go ahead and say this. As you can see, since we have no records now, it says an empty bracket. Now let's go ahead and add records and see. Now say if I add my record in my existing app for us to understand, if I've added my record here, the format has been shown in the JSON. As you know, and I've already mentioned that our records are being stored in the JSON format in our server, that is in our DB. Now similarly, let's go ahead and create our update and delete functions as well. As you can see, our create has been created. Over here, we are creating a record. Of course, creating from the front side, we will work on it. Now, in order to read, I'm going to say find by ID. Let's move ahead and create that. Now, as you can see, I have given something called as find by ID update. So in order to update, you want that particular record itself to be updated. To avoid that glitch that will be created otherwise, I'm going to say find by ID update. This will find us by ID as I have given my find over here. It will collect the ID of the particular employee and update. So our update operation is being carried on the same way our create has been done. Now also, if there is no record within that ID, we want this statement to be returned. Now let's go ahead and finish our operation by delete. Now for delete, we are going to check if the ID is passed is valid or not. Otherwise, it's going to return me a no record. Now for that, I have created a is valid next. Again, to delete a particular record, I'm going to find the record by its ID and then remove it. And hence, our record will be deleted. So this will complete our server side. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to create a client-side Angular application. So in order to create a client-side application, I'm going to open one more command prompt. Now here, since all this belongs to our Node.js part, I'm going to create another file where it says Angular app. Now to create our Angular application or our client-side application, I'm going to open my command prompt. Now here I'm going to say ng new our Angular app name, which I'm going to name it as Angular app, enter. Now this might take a while. Now once this is created, let's go ahead and open this application and see. I'm going to say ng serve open in order to open my application. Now as you can see, this is a bare minimum app which is auto-generated when we created our Angular application. Now let's go ahead and add all our features and see how we have created our required application. Now in order to understand what I have done in my Angular client-side application, I'm going to walk you through what I have created. So the first thing I did was I created components called employee. And in order to create that, the command that we used here is ng space g space c and the component name. And in this case, it is employee. Now, once I created that, all my component files will be established. Now here in my HTML, I go ahead and create a form that is required. Here, as we already saw, I need bare minimum facilities like div. Now, we don't want to spend all our time adding this. So we are just going to copy everything and we are going to add a table. Now, as you saw, I have added a table format record for my employees in order to store their records. As you saw, I've added an action button to edit our employee, an action button for deleting our employee record. Now, all this in our HTML. Let's go ahead and see what we've done in the rest of the files. Now, before we go ahead and see all our employee related component files, let's go ahead and create our models and services. For that, I have created a file name called shared. Now, in that, I'm going to create a model with the command ng space g our model name. For that, we have to give space class space employee dash dash type dash model. I'm going to write down that comment for you. So the command for creating model is ng space g space class employee, because our model name is going to be employee dash dash type model. Now when you hit enter, it will redirect to a model file. So when you have the model file, the first thing you're going to do is export the class employee. This means we have to create our record into a class. Now this is why we create our model. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a service. In order to add service, we have to type a command. And that is, the command is going to be ng space g space s and a service name. Here, my service name is also employee. So I'm going to give this and let's see what happens next in our service files. Now here, my service file is being created. Let's see the further operations here. Now here we're supposed to create an array. Now this array consists of all our employee records. Here I'm going to call that array. Next, for particular selected employee records, going to call that array. Next, we are going to add where we can retrieve our employees from, that is from our server, from our get call, we can add this. Now let's go ahead and see the rest part. We'll then come back to this again. So back here in our app.component.html, first thing we're going to do is we are going to call our router outlet. Now that router outlet should be called in our container for us to have a nice working application. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to call our services for our component. For that, I'm going to import the service package. Next, I will use providers as employee service. Next, I'm going to create a constructor which is private and create an employee service. Now with this, we can go ahead with our HTML again. Now in order to create this kind of form, all you have to do is go to bootstrap.com. There you'll find a basic form where you can find for employees and then create all basic tags and establish a form. Now I'll walk you through what extra I have added here. But for basic, you have to create number of div tags and give a form structure. Also, the next thing is I have created an ng on submit. Now, if I give information into my form, this should be accepted when I press the submit button. Now, this will be operated by our ng submit. Now, to add submit and reset button, we have created a div class again here. And inside that, we have called a custom button and we have added reset and submit. Now, in order to make our reset and submit button workable, all we have to do is go to employee.component.ts. And here we have created a function called as reset form. Next, a function called as onSubmit. Now, for this function, we have to add some more functionalities. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give my schema structure over here. Next, I'm going to call it in a service known as employee service. Now, since I've created employee service, everything that comes to this particular function comes from our service. This will avoid redundancy of our code. Now, I'm going to select the service that I have created, select a particular employee, and give the reset for that particular employee. Now, I'm going to call the function form reset. Now, this will provoke our form object. So here goes our reset function. Similarly, for submit, I'm going to say save successfully if I'm submitting, or update successfully if I'm updating. The same function is being used for both update and submit with if and else loop. Now, if I call a particular ID, the employee record is being submitted. Otherwise, for a particular ID employee, I can edit. Now, in order to request for a particular record, I need to subscribe. And this is where I have given subscribe. Now, it is important for us to give a toast. As you saw in my application, once I give a submit, it says saved successfully for a particular employee, and similarly it says updated successfully when a record is being updated. This is being done here. Now, before doing everything, something that we have to do is add our style classes into our styles.css sheet. Now, again, if you want this is available in Bootstrap website. Whenever you download your form, you can download the CSS features as well. Now, with that, we can go ahead with our components. Now, along with calling the service here, I'm going to go back to my services. And here in my service file, I'm going to create a HTTP client in order to call all my get and put records. Here, I'm going to call my post record for my employee, get list record for my employee, and put in order to update, delete employee in order to delete. And everything is being called with respect to our IDs. Now, ID is something that we generate in our MongoDB. Now, when you import this statement, do not forget to create a constructor in order to call and use HTTP clients. Now, going back to our HTML, now that we have created our forms and displaying our records, we have to make sure that our records are being displayed. As I've already told you about this, I have created a table structure here, and in order to display our records in a table format, we are creating this particular table, and hence we are calling particular records attributes with its ID called emp. Now, emp is something that stores employee service dot employees, which means it stores all the service records for our particular employees. With that, all our records that we type in our forms is being retrieved. Now, with this, our record is being displayed. So let's go ahead into the browser and see what in all records we have covered until now. So until now, I have covered form structure, how to add records, updating records, and also deleting records. Now, all we have to do is create routing and jump from one tab to another. For that, I have created routing services. Now, the first thing that I have created is components. Now, I've already discussed how we can add components. All I've done is add 3 components here. The first component is navbar in order to add all the tabs. Next is home in order to add home page, and post for our post or employee records table. Now we'll go ahead and see what is there in each of it. Firstly, we have navbar. In navbar, it is a simple div statement and HTML tag for us to add form link, record link, and our home link. As you can see, the router link is being activated here. Now we have not explicitly created any routing. As you can say, it is internal router link that has been called. Now once this is done, it is simple link tags that I've added for each of the routing. Now going back to our nav component, I have called the init component. Environment is being imported, and hence environment is being called. This is just for the appearance. Now again, all our components are being defined here. That creates our navbar. Now going back to our home page, similarly in our home page, we have added nothing but a simple title. Next, going back to our TypeScript file, I have added the title dynamically, which says Edureka app. Now similarly, I have called my import function, import of the component. Next, going back to our post, which has our records, the similar record of whatever table we have created in our form is being copy pasted here. Now, you could add your action button if you will, but I have not considered this and hence I've commented this out. Now, again, if you go to TypeScript file, I have called all the functions that I have called on my form. Now, since I want all my records to be displayed dynamically as and when I add into the form, all my functions should be called here. Let's go ahead and see our final application, how it works. Now, I'm going to say forms. I'm going to add one more record here. It says form submitted. Our create is successfully done. Our reading is successfully done. You can go here and check. It reads the record. Next, we have update. Let's see if it is updating. The records have been populated here. Right before we update, why don't we get into our MongoDB and check? I'm going to say refresh. Now, as you can see, both the records that I've added have been populated here. Now, I'm going to go back to my browser. Now, here in my browser, let me go ahead and update it. I'm going to say 3000 instead of 1000. I'm going to say submit, updated successfully. As you can see, the record is being populated. Let's go ahead and see. Yes, updated. Let's go to our MongoDB and check and refresh it. As you can see, it says 3000, which means our update is done successfully. Now, let's go ahead and see our delete. I'm going to delete this record. Going to say OK. Next, going to go to my MongoDB, refresh it. My record is being deleted. This way, we can add our CRUD operations, involve MongoDB, involve Node.js for our operations. Now, this will bring us to the end of today's segment. I hope this was useful and you learned all about CRUD operations. I recommend you to try more complex applications which will help you enhance your CRUD operations in Angular. Until we meet again next time, happy learning.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!